and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about... I do this every time, and I can never... I don't know what to say. What are we about?
We talk about stuff.
We talk about stuff that's classical, and you should know it. My name is Thomas Smagby. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. A.J. Hannenberg.
That's me.
And Mr. Graham Donaldson.
Hey.
Now, today we are talking about something that I don't have a witty comment to make about it. I've really nailed it on this introduction. I didn't know what our podcast was about.
It's going really well.
And I also don't... I know the name of what your episode is about. I have no idea how to make a pun about it. Not that I usually make puns anyway. We are here to talk about...
Like a medical condition from the sounds of it.
Yeah.
The ontological argument?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the Proslogion.
Yes.
Both.
Yes, both.
Answer is yes. But I've got a bad case of ontology, so...
You got to see
I
an
majored in ontology.
You got to see an
Wow.
ontologist.
It's wonderful. AJ, this is
Man,
your...
that's a ripe pun field right there.
Which one is...
Oh,
You have to go see an
Oh,
ontologist.
this is good. I like this. Okay. AJ, this is your episode, so would you take it away? These are some funny words we've used in our intro. What are we talking about?
Who wrote this? Is it the Bede? No, this is Ambrose of Canterbury.
Nope.
Oh, crap.
You're close.
Anselm of Canterbury.
Anselm
There.
of
Nailed it.
Canterbury.
Nailed
Now, I'm not going to talk about him very much. I'll tell you that right now. I don't have much on him. I did not do a whole lot of research on the person himself. I will tell you, he was exiled twice.
This Anselm guy was...
This Anselm character. He was a monk.
To a golden mountain.
Was he? What are you talking about?
Talking about the, whatever. The ontological
Is that a very
argument.
funny joke? Oh.
No, it's part of the ontological argument.
No, it is not. as far
Golden
as I know.
mountains.
What are you talking about?
The best thing that can be conceived.
I don't remember anything about Golden Mountains.
Whatever.
I literally just read it this morning.
Oh, okay.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. Maybe I'm making stuff up.
Different translation. I wouldn't worry about it. Now I'm curious about these Golden Mountains. Are the Golden Mountains in the room with us right now, Graham?
I will tell you about Paradise Island. We'll get there.
Nailed it.
And we didn't lose it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I read the Proslogion, which is by Anselm of Canterbury, and it is where one of the most famous philosophical arguments originates. And I always use it as an example for my students when they are writing and they want to know how long their paper has to be. And I say, one of the most famous philosophical arguments was written in half a page. You probably can't do that, so let's call it 2 pages, right? Like, my point is, you need good ideas. Don't throw words at a page until you have 2 pages. Tell me something good and tell it as briefly as you can. And so this is the example that I use, and I decided to read it this morning, and it's pretty great. It's an easy to get through. I think it's a cool 44 pages or so, and I think it is easy for a listener to get through. I also read one of the criticisms of it by another Christian of the time, and he said, here are the problems with what you're saying, and then Anselm's response. Now, I'll admit,
Who was it? Was it John Duns Scotus?
I'll have to look.
I have no idea. I don't think it was.
One of these. I don't think that name doesn't ring a bell.
All right.
So I'll admit those were a little tougher to get through, and I'll show you an example of exactly why, because I highlighted a whole sentence that might be the funniest sentence in English prose that you've ever heard. But we'll get there.
That is a big promise.
Yeah.
Wow,
It's pretty
okay.
good, you guys. I think you'll enjoy it.
Hey,
And maybe I oversold it.
Okay.
It is the sentence greater than which no sentence can be thought.
Wow. I think Graham might be right about this Golden Mountain thing. I don't know if it's in the Proslogion or whatever you're reading, but when I search St. Anselm Golden Mountain, a bunch of stuff comes up.
Tell me, where's it come from? Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
I just told you you're wrong. I don't want to back it up with any facts or details, but I just want you to know you're wrong.
Okay,
Just
first
blind assertion.
Yeah, exactly.
First blind assertion of the podcast. I'll ring the bell every time we have one of those.
Point Thomas.
Okay, point Thomas for a blind assertion.
Yeah.
So what I
Descartes.
really wanted to do was have Thomas read as the intro the very first section of the book, which I think you'll enjoy. So pretend that we haven't actually started the podcast.
Okay, happy to.
That you've just arrived.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go ahead and play a little part of it for you if I can get back to it. Proslogion.
Getting a little nervous right
Contents,
now.
chapter 1. Okay, just go ahead and read the first paragraph.
Okay. You highlighted the first sentence. Can I say that?
Yep, because I wanted you to read it.
Wow. Come now, insignificant mortal. Of course, you'd have me read this. Leave behind your concerns for a little while and retreat for a short time from your restless thoughts. Cast off your burdens and cares. Set aside your labor and toil. Just for a little while. Make room for God and rest a while in Him. Enter into the chamber, which is quoting Matthew 6:6, of your mind. Shut out everything but God and whatever helps you to seek Him, and seek Him behind closed doors. Speak now, my whole heart. Say to God, I seek your face, Lord, do I seek.
Good stuff.
That's great.
Isn't that a fun little intro? I always think we should start with Come now, insignificant mortal, leave behind your concerns for a little while.
We should.
Like, what a great intro.
That's how I should start my class. 10th grade.
Put that into your catechism.
Kinda,
That's awesome.
It kind of is great.
It is kind of great.
Yeah, okay. So apparently, in the intro, it's actually by Anselm also. He says that what he was trying to do was think up a proof for God that requires nothing outside of itself. A proof for God that stands on its own 2 feet, doesn't have to point to any evidence or anything outside of it, but it is clearly just a self-contained little proof for God that he can give to people.
Okay.
That was the impetus of writing this. And for a long time, he didn't find it, and he was getting kind of hacked with it because eventually it just was, occupying his mind when it could be occupied with other things. So he gave up, but then he tried to give up and it came back. Anyway, eventually it kind of popped into his head, right, while he was doing it. And that was where this book began. And so I will try to gloss over those bits that I think will especially appeal to our Christian audience about the greatness of God, where he is just sort of doing the praising God stuff, and I'll try to focus on the philosophy. So if you're non-Christian coming to this is still an interesting argument, right, as in the story of philosophy, and one that I still don't know how to controvert, and one that is still discussed, and there are even modern versions of it that consider multiple universes and all kinds of stuff. So just as a philosophical history thing, it is worth your attention. So chapter 1 is that just sort of intro business, right? So let's go ahead and jump to chapter 2, which is where the actual argument takes place. And so I'm going to read it to you. This is the ontological argument. So even the fool must admit that something than which nothing greater can be thought exists at least in his understanding, since he understands this when he hears it. And whatever is understood exists in the understanding. So here I think that it gets kind of convoluted because I think in the original it's 2 different words. I think intellectus is one of those.
Okay.
Right? And so I think they're using thought and intellectus, and it's almost interchangeable for us, but I think it had different shades of meaning for them. So you'll hear understand and understanding and thought, and those opposed to each other. Sorry. Anyway, so it exists in his understanding. And surely that than which greater cannot be thought cannot exist only in the understanding. For if it exists only in the understanding, it can be thought to exist in reality as well, which is greater.
Okay.
Because otherwise, if it didn't exist, then it wouldn't be the greatest thing you could think of.
Yeah. So, if that than which a greater cannot be thought exists only in the understanding, then that than which a greater cannot be thought is that than which a greater can be thought. But that's impossible. Therefore, there is no doubt that something than which greater cannot be thought exists both in the understanding and in reality. This is the basic version.
Mm-hmm. So
let me track you through it. Okay. Thomas, think of the greatest thing you can. And not the greatest, because all that has to do is be greater than everything else.
Okay.
So you have to think of the thing that nothing greater than this can be conceived. So it's not just the greatest thing that exists, right? Like a giant, like an ice cream cone the size of Jupiter.
Like a gold mountain.
A big old gold mountain, right? That's the greatest thing I can conceive. But a thing greater than which nothing can be conceived. Could I conceive of something greater than a gold mountain?
Yep.
Yes, I could. So this is the greatest possible thing to be conceived. You got it in your brain.
No, I like what would even fit in that? Like God is the obvious answer, but I don't what.
Good.
Great.
Awesome. Proved it.
Okay.
Okay. So he actually addresses you can't necessarily hold this in your mind, but you have the idea of the concept, right? Like you can kind of imagine there's a thing greater than which nothing can be conceived.
But what do you mean by greater?
So it is maximally good. It is maximally powerful. It is maximally pure. It is maximally existent.
Yeah.
Right? So you have this thing in your head.
Okay.
Okay? Now, answer me this question. Is it greater to exist in reality or to not exist?
Exist.
Therefore, this thing you are thinking
That's a blind assertion. Ding.
Oh, we got another one. AJ,
blind
look.
assertion. I missed it. I'm so sorry, guys. Do you want the bell, Graham?
No. Okay. Because we're talking philosophy. We're going to be dinging that bell all day long.
It's going to be great.
Time, yeah.
I'm very excited.
Yeah.
So, it is greater to exist than not to exist.
Yeah, sure.
Therefore, this thing you are thinking of, to avoid a self-contradiction, must have the quality of existing in reality. And there you go. God exists.
That doesn't make any sense.
Good job, Thomas.
Okay. Let's say that
Let's say
I love unicorns. I love unicorns.
Sure you do.
Unicorns are the greatest of all possible anything. The joy that they bring unto the world.
It's not true.
It is true because I love unicorns. So like greatness is determined by the person.
It's not though.
Okay.
But even if you say you love unicorns, can you conceive of a unicorn that's better than just the normal unicorn
Like
you can think of?
with wings.
Okay, Pegasus. Yeah.
Okay, so now it's not a unicorn anymore. So you're not thinking of the greatest possible unicorn. You're
I'm thinking
of
of a
Pegasus.
unicorn with wings, which is not
Pegasus.
Pegasus. They don't have a horn on the.
And it gives you like a sandwich every time you see it.
Ooh, that's a
Okay,
good
so
one.
that's greater.
Okay.
Now, what if this thing supremely loved everyone in the
I
universe?
hate this so much. Okay, yeah, that would be
Would
pretty
it be
great.
greater?
Yeah. It would be
Okay,
great.
what if this unicorn, instead of being present in one place, could be present everywhere at once?
Okay, that's pretty great. This is a good
Okay?
unicorn. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what if it knew everything?
Wow. Okay, that'd be an even better unicorn.
And loved you.
Wow, I would
was
love a
willing
loving
to die for you,
unicorn.
maybe.
Well, we're taking a turn there. Okay, but I don't know. Okay, so my unicorn is now God,
Yes.
apparently.
So you had tried to think of something. It wasn't the greatest because we thought of something greater. Right?
in
It wasn't the unicorn greater than which nothing can be conceived.
In fact, what you loved about that unicorn was really a love of God.
I hate this so much. I'll have anyway. But okay, but that leads me to then imagining something that is all knowing, all powerful, all whatever. But then I understand that it would be better were that thing to exist. But why is that necessarily true?
Because you must avoid the contradiction. So if you say, in my conception of the thing greater than which nothing can be conceived, and it has the quality of existing, if you say yes, but it doesn't actually exist,
Right.
well, then you're not thinking of the greatest thing anymore. You are thinking of something that has the resemblance of the greatest thing, but doesn't actually exist.
Okay.
So to avoid contradicting yourself, the thing that is greater than which nothing can be conceived must exist in reality.
Can't we hit the contradiction from the other side and say, why is existing better than non-existing?
So that's one place that you could, I think, and honestly, it's not addressed in the entire Proslogion. The premise of existing in reality being better than non-existing.
It's taken as a given.
It's taken as a given, and I think almost rightly so. It is better to be in reality a corporal thing that has all these qualities than to be an imaginary thing.
Don't
with these
ask
qualities.
Leopoldi.
Leopardi would not feel that way. Yeah, he'd totally disagree with that.
I don't ask Leopardi about anything. The guy doesn't
really
understand
should
bees.
not. Yeah. He's a perfect entomologist. What's the one about insects? Yeah.
And flowers don't feel pain in the same way we do. This guy, Leopardi, least favorite guy.
Okay. Sure. I still don't accept that last part. Like, I understand you saying that anything that does exist is better than an all-powerful thing that doesn't exist. I think that's what that final statement means. It doesn't. I don't see the connection from because you can imagine it and it's awesome. That awesome thing must also exist.
It's to avoid contradicting yourself. You say, look, this thing I'm imagining, yeah, it has the quality of existing, but it doesn't exist. Well, you are again no longer thinking of.
But then aren't I back to the beginning of like horses are awesome? So like unicorns would be more awesome, but they're not real. So a real life horse is better than a fake unicorn.
So yes, a real life thing is better than the fake thing,
Yeah.
but you can think of something better than a horse that exists. A unicorn that exists is one of those.
But because they don't exist, the horse is better.
No.
What?
What?
I thought
I'm trying to follow what you're.
Isn't existence
Can you
better?
lay out your argument?
I
again?
love horses. No, existence is better than non-existence, correct?
Oh.
So a unicorn would be better than a horse, correct?
Yes.
But a unicorn is not real, does
Sure.
not have physical form. Ergo, the horse is superior to the not real unicorn. Is that what this is arguing? Am I using its tools correctly?
I think you are using its tools correctly, but I think you are. But an existent unicorn would be better than
Would
both.
be, but it doesn't exist.
But yes, a unicorn doesn't. But that greater than which nothing can be conceived does. It has to by its
I
definition.
don't understand philosophy. Okay.
So we'll get a little bit deeper into it, and
Okay.
I will actually come up against some of the criticisms. One of which is the Paradise Island criticism. So we'll get there. So chapter 3, basically God cannot be thought not to exist. So this being exists so truly that it cannot be thought not to exist. For it is possible to think that something exists that cannot be thought not to exist, and such a being is greater than one that can be thought not to exist. So if you are saying, I am thinking of that which greater than which nothing can be conceived, so it's the greatest possible thing. Mm-hmm. Well, if you think it doesn't exist, well, you are not thinking of that great thing anymore. You are thinking of something lesser, something that can be thought not to exist, right?
Okay.
Like a unicorn
Right.
in your answer. I can conceive of a unicorn not existing, right? In fact, they don't exist.
Right.
I know this about unicorns.
Right.
But by the very essence of the thing I'm talking about, that greater than which nothing can be conceived, it must exist, right? Otherwise, I'm contradicting myself. I'm saying, yeah, I'm thinking about it, but it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I am now in a contradiction.
Sure. The part I'm misunderstanding is then, okay, you can find something real that exists, but if you don't believe in God, then you wouldn't say that God exists necessarily. You would say that a conception of God who is not real is inferior to fighter jets or whatever.
Sure, but he is also inferior to a God that exists, and that's the point. If I come up to you and I say, think of that thing greater than which nothing can be conceived,
Yep.
and you say, yeah, I got God, but he doesn't exist. Well,
It would be better if God existed.
you are no longer thinking of that great thing. You are thinking of something.
Isn't this question begging, like quite literally?
Honestly, not really.
Okay.
So the thing about the ontological argument is it's a lot easy to dismiss it and say you don't like it than it is to find the actual problem with it.
But you haven't proved God. You are saying it would be better if God existed than if he didn't exist.
Yes.
That doesn't mean therefore God exists.
So, okay, so follow me. It does.
It literally doesn't.
I know. So
I know you teach logic or whatever,
So
but
here's
there's no way.
Here's the thing: if you claim to be thinking of that thing greater than which nothing can be conceived, then he must. He must. The thing you are thinking of must actually exist in
Then
reality.
isn't that the end of the experiment? Just to say like, I can't do that.
You can't conceive of a God
Correct.
existing.
No, I can't conceive of something that's greater, that nothing greater can be conceived. I can't do it.
You can't conceive of the great thing.
Yeah.
You can't conceive.
All right, then you dumb.
I dumb. No, that's my takeaway right now. You can't conceive of God is what?
I'm just saying, why isn't that the...
Because I think it's a cop out that no one can actually support. You can think of great things. You can think of something that's maximally, at least hold that concept in your mind.
Doesn't this end up being the like empirical argument against it? It's like, all right, I haven't seen it. So like...
But you can conceive
I've seen
of
a
it.
horse, I've seen a sandwich, I've seen a fighter jet. Those are all pretty awesome.
Right.
But you can conceive it. Like we are talking about the concept right now. You can't claim that you don't understand what I'm talking about when I say that greater than which nothing can be conceived. You understand that concept.
But I can
Which means you
imagine-
can conceive
I guess
of it.
I understand the concept of like of greatness, of like things being better than things.
Yeah. And then, so you understand the concept of the greatest thing. You don't have to necessarily know all its qualities. We could argue about it and eventually get there, but you understand that concept. And if you can say that existing is better than not existing,
Why can't I just have an saying like, no, what I understand is that there's no such thing as greatest. It's just greater and greater and greater and greater and greater.
in an infinite series?
Yeah.
So the thing you are thinking of is infinitely great.
Is infinitely great.
And in that infinite greatness, is it better to exist?
But it's sure, but that
Oh,
infinite
and there we are.
But
We
that
arrived,
infinite
ladies and
greatness
gentlemen.
are all individual things.
What?
Yeah,
So-
there's infinite plus one, or there's
Yes.
there's the 100th greatest thing, and then the 101st greatest
Yeah.
thing, and then 102.
Yeah.
So then the next
So then
question
which
would be,
one is the best
it-
one?
Well, the one that encapsulates all of those things.
That I can't conceive of.
Sure you can. I just
Like
talked
the-
about it.
the
You understand what I'm
universe,
talking
like,
about?
I don't know.
You understood enough to say you couldn't conceive of it.
This is one you should watch on YouTube for Graham and my reactions as we're trying to think through this. I understand the words coming out of your mouth.
You do.
I still don't see how my ability to think of those things necessitates its existence. I understand how
Am I not explaining it correctly, or am I just...
No, I think you've explained it clearly.
Or are you just dumb?
No, I'm just dumb. Thank you. But like, okay, maybe I'll take it this way. There are smart people who still don't believe in God. Are they just illogical because they?
In this case, yes, they are self-contradicting.
But that again, just because something can exist and be better than something imagined and not exist, why does that necessitate its existence?
Because of the definition of that greater than which nothing can be conceived. So it is specifically those words, and not just the greatest thing. You can always conceive of something greater, but it is that thing that nothing can be greater than it. And so one quality of that thing is that it must exist.
Wait, why can't I say that that the idea of a god that actually doesn't exist is in fact better than a fighter jet? Which
That's
exists.
fine. And a God that does actually exist is better than both.
How can it be otherwise?
Why, yes.
Thank you.
Why,
Finally,
yes,
I'm so
Hannibal.
glad to have you guys on board. So
How else could it be?
How else could
So
it be?
yeah, he basically says in chapter 3, you cannot conceive of this thing not existing because again, then you are thinking of not the greatest thing anymore.
Okay.
Right? That then greater than which nothing can be conceived. I'm not going to say that phrase. I'm just going to call it the greatest thing.
Sure.
But Anselm is actually very sticky on this point later. He says it's not just the greatest thing because that could be just a planet full of gold, right? It's a great thing where there's like ice cream and puppies.
Sign me up. Yeah.
Wonderful. Sounds
Great.
awesome.
Yeah.
But this has to be, for the sake of the argument, that greater than which nothing can be conceived because that necessitates the existence. Because if you say, yeah, I get the concept of that, but it doesn't exist, well, again, you are self-contradicting. You don't get the concept because the concept, it must exist.
Okay.
Right? So that is his proof of God. Now, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I think the same way it's making you uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people sweep it aside as maybe not satisfying, right? Like, okay, I hear your argument. Maybe it's a self-contradiction is kind of the answer.
Yeah. There's just like a mechanism in there that I'm missing, but that is not for, you have explained it well, and you are accurately conveying the argument. It just doesn't, again, imagine you go to your, like, the most anti-religious person you know, and you're like, whoa, I'm going to prove to you that God really exists. They're not going to be like, wow, AJ, you did it.
No, I don't think it's going to be convincing to them.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think you are correct with that, but then ask them to say why, and they'll have a hard time saying why. That's the fun thing about the ontological argument is, again, like, I don't think that this is the proof that will bring people into the fold. Right? I think it's cool to think about once you are already in, or even fun to think about if you want nothing to do with it. But again, it's easier to say it's not convincing than it is to say exactly why it is not convincing. Because as a self-contained argument, it's pretty bang on.
I remain unconvinced, but you have well conveyed this argument.
Are you sure you don't want me to explain it again,
I really
Thomas?
don't. I'm so sorry.
All right, so chapter 5 is about this applying not just to the existence quality, but to avoid self-contradiction, it must apply to all other qualities, which means it must be the most truthful, the most happy, the most powerful, the most knowledgeable, right? All of those qualities that we traditionally associate with God, to avoid contradicting yourself and saying, yeah, I conceive of God, but this God is cruel. Well, then he is no longer that greater than which nothing can be conceived, and he must have those qualities as well. So he must be all of those things. All unity, he must have existed through all time, because to have a beginning or to have an end, well, that's not necessarily as great as having all of life at once. Or even, well, I guess we'll get there in a second. So that's chapter 5. Chapter 6 is a weird one. Weirder than the ones we've been on.
Say, yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of ones in here that seem to be sort of fights over things that we don't fight anymore over, like discussing, like this one about how God perceives things.
Okay.
So he says God must perceive things because perceiving is trying to get knowledge, right?
Yes.
God has all knowledge.
Sure.
Therefore, he perceives all, baby.
Okay.
That's chapter 6.
Good.
I know that it seems like I'm oversimplifying these, but for example, chapter 5 is a single paragraph.
Oh, wonderful. Okay,
yeah,
good.
chapter 6 is also it's 2 paragraphs. But that's the gist of it, right?
Yes.
That the if only corporeal things can perceive because the senses exist in a body and are directed towards bodies, then how can you perceive, right? So that's the question. And it's because he has all knowledge, therefore he can perceive.
Okay.
I think this is a bad argument.
Oh.
I think this is affirming the consequent. So
How is this argument different from the rest of them?
So I'll lay it out. So if you, let's see, if you have a knowledge, you must have perceived God perceives it. Okay, so if you have knowledge, you must have perceived it. God has, no, that's not, it's the other way around. So if you try to perceive something, it will lead to knowledge. God has all knowledge.
Oh,
Therefore, he has all perception. Right? It works backwards in an if-then statement. So, for example, if I take a shower, I get wet. Mm-hmm. God is supremely wet. Therefore, God is supremely showered. Mm-hmm. Right? That doesn't necessarily make sense.
Sure.
Or if I take a shower, I get wet. I am wet. Therefore, I have showered. Well, I might have gone out in the rain. I might have done other things. I think it is trying to establish a quality of God that he perceives all without circumventing. I'm actually much more comfortable saying God just knows all.
I was going to say, the problem is that there's like an intermediary step, but the other ones don't have that. So it would be better for someone or something to be wise. Therefore, this God has all wisdom. Like,
Yes.
that's okay. but wisdom comes from reading books. Therefore, God has read all book. Or is that the right way to do it?
Yeah, therefore God has perceived all
all
books.
Yeah. So
Right.
it's that intermediary step that makes it worse than earlier in the book.
Yeah, I think that this one is a particularly bad argument. He kind of doesn't nail it. There's another one in there that I also don't think is very good.
Okay.
Chapter 7 is, okay, so we've established that he is the maximum. He has got all qualities to the maximum. Does this include evil qualities?
No,
How come?
because evil is a negation of good, and because he has all good things, he has a negative infinity of evil things, which is the same as a positive infinity of good things. I don't know what he says.
You're not far off, actually.
You
So
want to take Graham? You got to guess.
But why can't wait? I know where you're going with this, but why not? Why can't you say things like, a lot of ham is good. Therefore, God is infinite ham as well as infinite truth.
infinite ham?
Yeah.
I love ham. Yeah, it's a great point.
Because I would wager to say infinite ham is not good.
Infinite ham is great. What are you talking about?
Infinite ham is not good. Do you want to live in infinite ham? I don't want to
Yes.
live in infinite
Sign me
ham.
up.
Got to breathe.
Oh.
That's not a great thing. Infinite ham is great. Infinite ham, not great. One who can create infinite ham, that's great.
We're back to God.
Okay, evil, no. God's not evil.
Yeah, so a critic could say, right, well, just like with the ham thing, okay, wouldn't someone who is a serial killer be better than just a killer,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
So to avoid contradiction, this thing greater than which nothing can be thought must be the greatest killer ever.
Of all time, yeah.
Right, so that is one possible argument a person could make, is that you kind of turn it around and say, okay, this great thing you're thinking of, it must have all evil qualities as well as all good qualities, right? But he answers and says, well, evil, and I think it's the answer you kind of give, evil is really a weakness, right? And so what you're trying to say is that God is the most weak thing, but that's not
Not the same as being the greatest. It's the
not
opposite.
the same. It is literally the opposite. When that is really what evil is a mistake. It's a weakness. It's an evil. It is a lack of power. It is impotence. And so those things are things that cannot be attributed to God because it's the opposite, moving in the opposite direction. So you're essentially right. If he is the supremely evil thing, it would be a negation of all great things. So that cannot be part of the definition of that greater than which nothing can be thought.
That's not the one that you have a bone to pick with, is it?
Nope, I think that was pretty good.
Okay.
Chapter 8. This is where his screwy one kind of gets screwy.
Okay.
So he starts to talk about his greatness in mercy versus his greatness in justice. So he's like, God justly punishes and justly spares infinitely. How does that work? Like he's trying to figure out the balance between justice and mercy.
Okay.
And he kind of spins his wheels for a couple of chapters, and then I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
At the end, he's just like, "Am I even getting it? Like, God, can you approve what I'm saying? I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying that he is just to himself when he punishes, but he's just to us when he is merciful. But that's not a contradiction
Is he really like working
because
it out
he is
that way?
one. Yeah, it seems like he's just sort of working it out. And by the end, he just says, "Well, justice is what you do, and mercy is what you do, and because you do it, it's good. That's how it works."
That's fine.
And I don't think that is a good argument either, right? I think it would maybe line up with other theologians that say that justice is one of God's qualities, and we can't set justice above God because it is essentially synonymous. But this just isn't a good argument, right? Where he kind of spins his wheels for a long time and ends up saying, "Well, it's just what you are." So there you go.
Or he just didn't know how to answer the question, so he had to end the chapter at some point.
But he doesn't talk about you can be just and merciful at the same time. The justice.
He does. He says your mercy is infinite and your justice is infinite, and they are parts of your character, and that's why you do them, and that's why they're great.
Like a man died for sin, but it was also merciful for all of us. Like he doesn't talk about how the cross is the justice and mercy at the same time.
Not really, but the weird thing is he doesn't talk about it here, but the atonement theory, the theory of atonement, atoning salvation, is Anselm's.
Is he Cur Deus Homo? Did he write Cur Deus Homo? Why God Man?
Don't know.
I don't know.
No, okay.
But before that, it was a ransoming
Anselm
thing.
of Canterbury?
Yeah.
Is that this guy? Then yes.
Yeah, so
So-
he talks about that in Cur Deus Homo.
Yeah, so before Anselm, the notion of the cross was that he had to ransom us back from the devil because essentially the evil owned us. And so his death was like a ransom. He paid the ransom for our sins. But from Anselm onward, it was kind of an atonement thing. God's justice required a death. And so he fulfilled in his mercy the justice for that death. And so both his justice and mercy are fulfilled. So that's him,
But he doesn't give the
but
answer
not
here.
here.
Right.
His answer here is just like, it's just what you are. So
So
there
then
you
he
go.
had to write this other one to
Yeah.
answer that question. He
Yeah,
got around
exactly.
to it eventually.
Okay, how are we doing on time?
You halfway through, 30 minutes.
Okay, whew, that's just about right.
Good.
Okay, next section is he wants to address being no parts in God. Now, this is something I don't think that we moderns would necessarily have an issue with. They saw unity as a really great quality, being all one single substance. I think we are comfortable knowing that sometimes one thing is a lot of little things, right? We know about atoms, we know about molecules, we know about organs, and all of those things that go up to make up our world. And I don't think we see it as a negative that there are parts to the whole. I think he did, right? That unity as seen as one of those qualities that must be a part of the Godhead. And so he said, you are the most supreme one thing. And then he has to do a little bit of backpedaling, talking about the Trinity.
Yeah.
And I think this is, from him, is partially where we get the heresy, like saying it's a heresy, trying to say that they are three different people or different parts, right? Where it's actually different pieces of God. He's saying, no, it's a unity. You are three in one single thing. And so I think that's this is one of the places it comes from.
I've never totally, I know there's a whole debate around simplicity, complexity. Part of it, I think, is the possibility of contradicting wills if you have multiple parts, which therefore there can't be in God. I know it's a big deal in like ancient debates, but I don't know much more other than God must be only one.
Yeah, and I don't think we have that same, I don't know if we have that same hang up now.
No.
Do you have that same hang up, Donaldson?
I don't
Like
think
that you
so.
require
I think you're right
unity?
in saying that our understanding of like how things are made up of smaller things is, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've come a ways in that. Anselm lived around 1100, so they had a different worldview back then.
Sure.
Okay, this next one I find really interesting. Chapter 19 is about eternal life versus eternal time. So
Okay.
this is where he establishes that God is outside of time. Because if you say, okay, this thing that I cannot think of anything greater is going to end.
That's worse than if something kept going.
Exactly, so it must not end. And what if I said it had a beginning?
That's worse than if it didn't have a beginning.
Exactly. So it must not have a beginning, nor can it have an end. And what if I said it is only in the present and has lost both past and future?
That sounds bad.
That sounds
That
bad.
also sounds bad. So it must be all moments, all the time, in present to this being, right? And this is to avoid self-contradiction. It must be eternal, or as opposed to infinite. I think I'm doing a distinction without a difference, but what I mean is instead of an infinite series of time, it is a fullness of all time at once.
Sure. The way you're presenting it is very much on the logic of it. I noticed in the first paragraph I read, he's quoting Bible stuff. Is this mostly a series of logical arguments to prove these attributes of God?
It's a lot of logic. Yeah.
I just that's a part that I'm finding fascinating of how he's getting to these attributes of God. It's not a pull out your verse and do that. There are things we can know about God just through like reasoning through these things.
Yeah, well, and that was his goal. He
Yeah.
wanted a self-contained argument that sort of established who God was.
Yeah.
And he started with the single argument proving his existence, and
Yeah.
then has sort of extrapolated that you can't think him not to exist.
Right.
He's got to be one. He has to have all the best qualities. He's got to be truly an infinite being rather than just one that kind of lives eternally through a series of time. And he, can't have parts. He's justly punishing and justly sparing, although his argument for that is not good. And he perceives everything. Again, not a great argument.
Okay. And also, and is experiencing all moments of time at the same time. I don't know how he describes it, but yeah, not just stuck going one direction in time, but outside of it, as we would say now.
Yeah, outside of it entirely. All right, so here's one fun, weird chapter. See if you guys can help me make sense of it. Chapter 21, whether this is the age of the age or the ages of the ages.
I'm going to let Graham take this one.
So, is this the age of the age, and it's just one paragraph, the whole chapter. So, is this the age of the age, or the ages of the ages? For just as an age of time contains all temporal things, so your eternity contains the very ages of time. This eternity is indeed an age, because of its indivisible unity, but it is ages because of its boundless greatness. And although you are so great, Lord, that all things are full of you and are in you, nonetheless you have no spatial extension, so that there is no middle or half or any other part of you.
Graham, what do you think?
Age of Age. Ding.
All right, let's move on. So that seems to be another one of those where I feel like I don't know the controversy.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. That there's
Some sort of internal argument going on within the
there's
church.
like a monk he had a fight with at the dinner table, and now he's writing. It's like
He's like, yeah,
Age of
it's
Age.
the flippant age of the ages, or it's both, right? And also, you don't have any middle. And I'm like, well, okay. All right, I'm on board there, Anselm. Great.
Cool.
I hope you beat that guy at
Yeah.
dinner.
Yep.
Don't know. Rock and roll.
Take that, Borfus from Canterbury or whatever your name is.
Borfus. Borfus the monk. But he was a treat.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we just sort of wind down until the end.
Okay.
And that is the Proslogion.
So you think it is logically coherent?
I have a hard time finding a hole in it.
What are the modern? What are the famous holes that people have
So-
lobbied against it?
So the next chapter is sort of one of the famous. Or it's Granillos' reply on behalf of the fool. Granillo, yeah, and
Borfus.
yeah, it's Borfus.
Borfus is
Borfus,
his pen-
good old
it's
Borfus.
his pen name.
So he's going to get into it, and I'll be honest, I understood a chunk of it
Okay.
because it really leans into the. I mean, you guys noted in some of the passages I read, there's so many negations. It is not this, and therefore this, and
Yeah,
not
yeah.
this, and greater
Right.
than which nothing can be. And I get lost.
Sure.
And this is one of the sentences that I wanted to read to you guys was them discussing this bit. Let's see. So this is, I think, actually within Anselm's reply. Yeah, so I'll go Granillos' criticism, his big criticism, the one that everyone can actually understand, and then I'll talk about Anselm's reply.
Okay.
So the criticism that Granillo comes up with after talking about some stuff about how he holds it in thought, and I think he had the same beef you did. He's like, yeah, I can conceive of this thing. Doesn't mean it's real.
Right.
And so Anselm has to,
Say more about. He has to defend it more.
he has to defend it more again. But his is, okay, think of the island greater than which no island can be conceived.
Okay.
You got it?
Sure.
Now, is it greater to exist or not to exist?
Exist.
Therefore, this island exists.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And has existed for all
For
time.
all time. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that is the greatest, one of the most famous criticisms,
Rebuttals, yeah.
right? Rebuttals.
Yeah.
Anselm answers it essentially the same way that I answered your unicorn thing. Was, okay, now,
Do you want an island that is like sentient, or do you know, like?
yeah, exactly. Would a sentient island be better? Okay,
Yeah,
would
sure.
it be better if it was, if it could love you?
I feel like this island knows
What if
me.
this island existed everywhere rather
Yeah.
than in just one place?
Right.
What if it, died for your sins,
sure.
like that kind of
Yeah,
thing?
right. Yeah.
Then of course you sort of just end up in the same place as God. Maybe that was an argument I came up with, and more than Anselm did. But Anselm kind of points at the same thing. He's like,
Just because
you could conceive of something greater than that island,
Right.
Right? I can conceive of a God who is greater than the island, and therefore it sort of negates it, right? This is a single special case. This argument only applies to that greater than which nothing can be conceived.
Yeah, yeah.
It has to be at the very top of the heap,
So you can't do
or
the
the
same
whole thing
trick.
breaks up.
You can't do the same trick for like a beer or an island or like
I declare that beer exists.
or like an afternoon or whatever.
yeah,
right.
It has to be only in the case of the greatest thing.
Although,
Otherwise, you can think of greater
If you
things.
have the greatest beer upon which
Hmm.
no other beer can be conceived, please mail it to us at the guys at Classical Stuff. Email us.
email
We'll
us
send
beer?
you an address.
Yeah, and we'll send you a video of us drinking it and enjoying
Yeah.
it. And we'll talk about whatever you want us to.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but if it is not the beer greater than which no beer can be conceived,
We'll talk about whatever we want.
yeah, whatever we dang well
no
please.
deal. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the biggest criticism is the Paradise Island criticism.
Okay. And the rest of them are just incomprehensible.
I hate to admit it, but they are really hard to follow.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, for example, I'll just read one little.
I want a funny sentence.
Okay, I'll find you a funny sentence.
Thanks.
Let's see. I'll just read you the first paragraph.
it.
Someone who either doubts or denies that there is any such being as that than which nothing greater can be thought is told that its existence is proved in the following way. First, the very person who denies or entertains doubts about this being has it in his understanding, since when he hears it spoken of, he understands what is said. Further, what he understands must exist in reality as well, and not only in this understanding. All right, so far it's pretty clear. The argument for this claim goes like this: to exist
so.
to exist in reality is greater than to exist only in the understanding. Now, if that being exists only in the understanding, then whatever also exists in reality is greater than it. Thus, that which is greater than everything else will be less than something and not greater than everything else, which is, of course, a contradiction. And so that which is greater than everything else, which has already been proved to exist in the understanding, must exist not only in the understanding, but also in reality, since otherwise it could not be greater than everything else.
We should have done the Proslogion first.
A what?
Of our
We should have done the
episodes.
Proslogion
Or-
first
so this is-
in
yeah.
our order of
You
episodes.
guys having trouble tracking?
Well, yes, but I don't think changing the order would have helped me very much.
He can perhaps reply, the only reason this is said to exist in my understanding is that I understand what is said. But in that same way, could I not also be said to have in my understanding any number of false things that have no real existence at all in themselves?
Right.
Since if someone were to speak of them, I would understand whatever he said. Unless perhaps it is established that this being is such that it cannot be had in thought in the same way that any false or doubtful things can, and so I am not said to think of what I have heard or to have it in my thought, but to understand it and have it in my understanding. Since I cannot think of it in any other way except by understanding it, that is, by comprehending it in genuine knowledge, the fact that it actually exists.
I think this is what a headache feels like.
Yeah, exactly. It's rough. And that, again, that is actually one of the more understandable passages. So I wanted to read one little...
What was the greatest sentence in the English language? Was it that first
Are you guys ready?
sentence about
Oh no, this
mere mortals?
is from Anselm's reply.
Okay.
Then I said that if it is understood, it exists in the understanding. Or does that which has been shown to exist necessarily in actual fact not exist in any understanding? But if you say that even if it exists in the understanding, it still does not follow that it is understood. Notice, however, that if it is understood, it does follow that it exists in the understanding. For when something is thought, it is thought by means of thinking. And what is thought by means of thinking exists in thinking just as it is thought. And in the same way, when something is understood, it is understood by means of the understanding. And what is understood by means of the understanding exists in the understanding just as it is understood. What could be clearer than that?
There it is. There's the
I
line.
read that section, and then the what could be clearer than that, and I was like, oh man, this goes. It's got to go in the quote book because it just makes no dang sense at all.
Yeah.
That's great. So
I am completely convinced. It is.
no, but maybe that joke even like brings us to the maybe the like payoff of this. Let's say this is logically coherent.
Okay.
Let's say that this is the argument that sort of throughout history no hole can be brought into, and this is like a slam dunk proof of God. Then why hasn't it done anything?
Yeah.
Why doesn't everybody listen to this and be like, gosh dang it, like
Probably most
God
of that
exists.
is it's just like blown off of like this was AJ's comment from before. It's not really dealt with. It's just kind of ignored.
I think the problem is it's a semantical argument.
Just to be, you mean it's just about words? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
people think it's just about words.
Or-
It doesn't actually have any purchase.
Or this is an argument where the limits of our own words. What this argument
Sure.
proves is the limits of our own words, not the proof, not the existence of God.
Right.
Yeah.
And even then, so you guys know the other proofs for the existence of God, right?
Yeah.
The prime mover, the
Yeah, sure.
first cause.
Some of the Aquinas ones. Yeah.
Some of the Aquinas ones. I think they're
One
they're
from Beauty.
five.
Five.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a beauty one? I don't think there is a beauty
I
one.
thought there was a beauty one.
I don't know if it's there's a I can't remember the theologian. You like him a lot. I forget his name. There is one, but I don't think it's one of Aquinas's.
There's a theologian I like.
Yeah, I can't remember. Isn't there Karl Barth? Isn't there a Barth argument around?
Barthian?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Anyway.
You think I like Karl Barth?
So there's the unmoved mover, the first cause, the argument from contingency, right? Our existence is contingent upon something else's existence. The argument from degree, which is we see all kinds of things in degree, like more or less. For example, the argument about goodness, right? Why can't it just be a series with when we stop low? He says, well, since you can perceive the
There being a
degree,
higher
there
one.
must be something at the top of it. Argument from final causes or ends. The objects in our world behave in regular ways. This can't be due to chance, since they would not behave with predictable results. So the behavior must be set, but it can't be set by themselves, so it must be set by
Someone. A God,
someone, right?
Yeah.
So those are the five proofs. But even those, I think most people don't find convincing. Perhaps because we have the Big Bang. I think for a long time, maybe people did.
Oh, I don't know. That's interesting. Again, I just think they're not considered or dealt with. I don't want to just think of like the way people engage with religion. It's not primarily intellectual. And so why would an intellectual argument convince people one way or the other?
It's Hillsong.
Or it's an emotional experience, or it's a community that you're a part of. Like it's
Love that music.
Yeah, or I love the people, or something like that.
But even with these, I don't even know if these are as good as the ontological argument, in my opinion. Because the first
The
first
Aquinas
cause or the first mover, it's dodging the infinite series question, right?
Yes.
Right. So could it just be an infinite series of causes all the way back?
Yeah.
Well, conceivably, we could have infinite universes that never really began. It's just been always popping in and popping out, and we are kind of, I don't want to say begging the question, but God Himself is uncaused, right? And so we have to rely on something that we've said to start the whole chain.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the Aquinas ones, I think they're from the Summa, and they're like an aside. He's not saying these are the 5 reasons God must exist. It's like he's writing about something else, and it's kind of inserted. It's not. It's much less expounded on than the 44 pages you went through for this one.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the difference too, because
Yeah.
Aquinas obviously believes that God exists.
And what I really liked about this one is I thought the ontological argument was just self-contained in existence. I love that he actually moved forward to establish all the attributes of God from that one argument.
Yeah.
Right? I never realized he did that before. But it's kind of cool the way in which he establishes that. I mean, with a few exceptions where he
The
doesn't
ones
really
you
nail
talked
it.
about, yeah. And does he say anything about people? He's assuming some kind of typical, like, rational actor thinking through these things. Couldn't someone be wrong in their conceptions of what is higher or better?
Yeah, probably. I think he's just assuming rationality.
But didn't we already disprove the
What if someone
Enlightenment?
was like a Mars bar?
I love
like-
Mars bars.
I mean,
That was my unicorn example.
and you're
love
like, I can't think
unicorns.
of any. I literally can't think of anything better than a Mars bar.
You can, though. A bigger
No,
Mars bar.
I can't. I think a bigger Mars bar is actually worse.
What
Just
about
like my
the thing
infinite
that-
ham argument.
What about the thing that created a Mars bar?
No.
Wouldn't it be greater than a Mars bar?
I just want the Mars bar.
AJ's got a great point about the creator of the Mars bar. I'm gonna have to give him that one. Sorry, I
Because
don't.
if you have the creator, then you can have
I'll give AJ.
as many Mars bars as you
I
want.
don't want infinite Mars bars. I just want the one Mars bar.
This reminds me of our what was the episode you did where we talked about penguin marriage for an hour?
Oh, my word.
I'm worried about we're going in that direction right now. But
I maintain that was a good conversation.
That was
Maybe
on.
I'm
You were
the
talking about
only
like
one.
mimetic rivalry, and then was it that one? Was it I See
Yes.
Satan Fall Like Lightning? Then
Yeah,
we had
that
to do
one,
a
yeah.
like
It was,
follow up.
Gerard, yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Apparently, I like semantical arguments. Apparently,
Yes,
that's what we're
it's
learning.
exactly
Because
is that-
Gerard had that one little throwaway line about like animals don't rival each other or whatever it
And I was like,
was.
that's a load of trash.
Yeah.
Because it seemed to be this
Oh my
whole
God.
premise.
I don't want to do this.
I really want to
Please don't.
let's dig back in, guys.
I don't. Please don't. I think Grant's question still stands of like, well, why hasn't this kind of settled the question of the existence of God?
Well, I mean, is it the thing that makes me come to God? Nope.
No, yeah.
Is it the thing that is going to stop me from walking away from God? Probably not. Yeah. There are other things, other arguments I have that are more convincing to me than this particular one, because it is
Why
just a
does God
semantics
allow
one.
razor blades to be put in Mars bars?
Oh my gosh.
No, that's not the argument for God. What are you talking about?
No, that's an argument as why you would walk away.
Sure, yeah. So the problem of evil is a good
Exactly.
one.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I would stay, and this is a more recent one, is because apart from God, morals are either totally ambiguous or entirely obliterated. Right? There is no.
Or you get depressed like Leopardi. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not
if
great.
it's just naturalism, that means that there's morals have no purchase on the man.
Yeah, sure.
I can do whatever I please.
Sure.
So there's a lot of reasons I stick around, but I can't say the ontological argument is one of them. But dang, it sure is interesting.
It is interesting. I'll take that.
I think one of the recent versions has, can you conceive of a world in which this being exists? Like they add the best of all possible, like the world's argument and, other dimensions and stuff. That's kind of fun.
This is still a philosophical argument that's being developed or worked on. Is
Yep.
that when? Okay. Yeah, I find it's all very interesting. It's one that I feel like I need to sit with more to think about.
Yeah, I need to go into the old Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which
Always the right place to
listeners,
go.
you guys should check it out. It is killer.
Graham, I think Golden Mountain might have been Hume. I see Hume's name comes up when I search for Golden Mountain. So I don't
All right.
know.
Well, if we're ending early, we can end early.
Cool.
Rock and roll. Thank you all for listening. This has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. You can find us online at classicalstuff.net. You can email us at theguys@classicalstuff.net. You can find us on Twitter at ClassicalStuff, CLSSCAL stuff. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/classicalstuff, where we post in between episodes. Graham's trying to keep himself
getting
awake.
tired.
Yeah, I know. We did an AMA, which we post on Patreon, which you can find there, and then 3 episodes right after that. So
Plus in betweens. We recorded 7 things today.
it's been, yeah.
In 6 hours, boys.
Well, thankfully we like this stuff. So thank you all for listening, and we're going to record an in-between episode right now.
Yep.
So bye,
Let's do it.
everyone.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.